Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm very glad to moderate today the event Air Diplomacy in the Mediterranean region, organized by Operation EU-NAVFOR Mediterranean in collaboration with La Sapienza University of Rome. Good afternoon, everyone. We are following us on social media and on the website formiche.net. And thank you to Admiral Fabio Agostini, commander of Operation EU-NAVFOR Mediterranean and promoter of this initiative. Good evening, Admiral. Today we are going to talk about the diplomacy in the Mediterranean region, an element that could contribute to increase the stability and the security of the area, and that has shown all its importance after the COVID pandemic. We will focus on the so-called vaccine diplomacy, the use of vaccine supplies as a tool of soft power. Several countries are in fact using agreements on the international distribution of vaccines to strengthen their position in the global scenario, enhancing their influence in the Middle East and the North Africa region. The COVID pandemic has taken an incredible toll of lives, in addition to its devastating economic, financial, and social effects. In this scenario, vaccines represent the hope of a quick return to life as before. Europe, with its multilateral COVAX initiative, can be a leader in this process, enforcing bilateral initiatives in the area and strengthening its influence over its southern border, the Mediterranean region. To get into the details of today's webinar, I leave it to Admiral Agostini. Admiral, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Flavia. Good afternoon to all. After 4 successful conferences, today we are here for another event of the Road to ShadeMed. ShadeMed conference is an important event that I recall for the benefit of everybody will be held in early autumn this year, about in October. First and foremost, I would like to thank our speaker for today, who are about to share with us their view on today's topic, the health diplomacy in the Mediterranean region. But let me thank, first of all, our moderator, Flavia Giacobbe, that is an experienced journalist, director of 2 important media in Italy, Formiche and Air Press, media that are also partner of our Road to ShadeMed events. Being a military man, I cannot forget that at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, politics and media are often used the metaphor of war against COVID. We all remember President Macron say openly, "Nous sommes en guerre," we are at war, or the BBC stressing that healthcare workers are on the front lines, scientists are the new generals, economists draw up battle plans, and politicians call for mobilization. As for a war, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on international relations has been the subject of many speculation among analysts, trying to wonder about its impact and predict what the day after would look like. For my humble opinion, we have both certainty and uncertainty when it comes to the world in the coming years. While the crisis is so far over, the COVID pandemic could be seen in the international relation both as a game changer and as an accelerator of trends. From a foreign policy point of view, we have testified that the classical instruments of diplomacy are being jointly managed with other policy areas, such as environmental and technological matters, use of military means, cyber defense, trade, strategic communication, and of course, health issues. In that sense alone, the pandemic is already proving to be a game changer. The COVID pandemic represents, for example, a further challenges for the Mediterranean basin, and not just for healthcare systems. The Mediterranean is home to multiple humanitarian, security, and development challenges, affecting also vulnerable populations. COVID increases the effect of those regional challenges, but also it has an effect on military operation, energy supplies, shipping industry, and economy. One case above all, the COVID pandemic has had a tremendous impact in Libya. As of the 13th of June this year, nearly 190,000 people have been affected, with more than 3,000 casualties in a population that is more or less a tenth of the Italian one. We assess that the pandemic has been directly or indirectly among the causes of the significant incident in the migration flow from Libya in 2020 and at the beginning of this year. Due to the reduced control of the coast by the legitimate Libyan authorities and the condition in the detention center unfit to accommodate too many migrants in a period of COVID-19. The pandemic has had a huge impact also on a military operation, and in particular on maritime operations. In the restricted space of a ship, just one infected can lead to an outbreak that can very rapidly bring to severe operational disruption. COVID-19 era has also seen the wide use of the so-called health and vaccine diplomacy, with some countries using aid supplies, masks, and vaccination to strengthen regional ties and to enhance their own power and global status. This has also been clear during the recent G7 summit in Cornwall. Vaccine inequality between countries in regions will pose a significant risk to all already fragile global recovery. Timely and universal access to COVID vaccinations will mean the difference between ending the pandemic promptly and placing the world economy on a trajectory of a resilient recovery, or losing many more years of growth, development, and opportunities. While vaccine diplomacy can help to narrow the gap between those who have and those who don't have the vaccine, most of the donations provided have not had a major impact. Rather than promoting global equity or providing assistance to those most in need, donations have cemented traditional sphere of influence. In the world of vaccine donation diplomacy, a friend in need is indeed a friend. Finally, on my view, the pandemic has shown that disinformation has entered in a new era too. Some countries in particular have seized the opportunity of this crisis to advance their geopolitical objectives through the spread use of fake news and disinformation. Our distinguished experts today are asked to explore this issue and maybe to provide recommendations to better understand, cooperate, and face future regional challenges with an inclusive and balanced approach. Let me conclude by saying that I hope you will enjoy the fruitful and enriching exchange that will occur today, and I will invite all of you connected to continue to follow us during the forthcoming webinars that will lead us to the main event of this year, the ShadeMed 21 in October. As always, I would like to invite social media followers to comment freely and openly on the various topics that our excellent speakers will outline during their intervention. Your contribution will certainly be useful and will allow us to better develop our communication and operation activities. Thank you very much for your attention, and Flavia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Admiral, for your speech, and stay with us. Joining us today is Moritz Rudolph, a researcher at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. Good evening, Mr. Rudolph.
Good evening. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, also with us is Roy Jelinek, a researcher at the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies and a non-resident scholar at the Middle East Institute. Thank you and welcome, Mr. Jelinek.
Hello, good evening.
Finally, I welcome Olivier Belly, head of the EU Task Force of Vaccine Strategy of the European External Action Service. Good evening. I would now start with a question for Moritz Rudolph. Mr. Rudolph, how is China's health diplomacy embedded into the Belt and Road Initiative? I remember that you have 5 minutes for a question, an answer.
Thank you so much again for the invitation. So I'll just try to limit it to the 5 minutes. When we are talking about China's health diplomacy that has pretty much been launched in February, late February, early March of 2020, what was quite fascinating, I think, was that the term of the Health Silk Road came up as quite a surprise for many observers outside of the Belt and Road experts. Because when we look in the first Belt and Road documents, official documents from 2015, we already have clear references to international health cooperation as one of the aspects of the Belt and Road Initiative. There are 5 main areas of cooperation. One of them is people-to-people exchanges. This is how it's been translated. And in this, there are several subcategories, and one of them is health cooperation. And in this health cooperation, it is specifically listed at this point already, cooperation in fighting and preventing the spread of pandemics. So already in 2015, in the Belt and Road documents, this was already part of it. And in the other following milestone Belt and Road documents, there's also been a reference to this initiative in 2017 and 2019. And with the promotion of the Belt and Road Initiative, it has the topic of health cooperation was always present, because China is promoting the Belt and Road Initiative bilaterally, but also in multilateral regional forums. For instance, China plus China Cooperation Forum with the Southeast Asian states, with African states, with the so-called 17+1. And in each of those cooperation forums, health was already on the agenda since 2015. On various levels of importance, but you already had, for instance, regular meetings of the health ministers of the 17 Central Eastern and of the 17 Central and Eastern European countries with China ongoing. But also with other countries, this was already the case. So, for instance, China has been promoting health cooperation with Central Asian countries, with using Xinjiang province as a pivot for having health tourism in Central Asia, and to create a hospitals alliance with other countries in the region. So this was already there before the start of the pandemic. So, and then when COVID came, the Chinese side was able to utilize those mechanisms that it had already established in those China plus X mechanism, and put China's health diplomacy on the agenda. So that they used to be not the main issues, of course, but the Belt and Road Initiative is quite flexible. So it is an organism where you can just change different topics and put them on the top of the agenda. And we have seen this now with this Health Silk Road. On the multilateral front, another addition to that is China has signed an MOU with the World Health Organization already in 2017. And since then, it has used the term Health Silk Road. And so for China, when it's engagement with the WHO, for instance, this was already a topic that was then soon to be put on the agenda. First, China as a recipient of aid from other countries, saying that the Health Silk Road spirit is seen by China receiving aid from 58 countries until February of 2020. But then when it turned around, the Health Silk Road spirit, how the Chinese side likes to refer to it, was demonstrated, as the Chinese side says, by China delivering masks and now later vaccines to other countries, which are part of this framework of this initiative. So this was something quite interesting to see how this specific topic, which was a niche topic. There are many other niche topics, but we can see the functioning of the Belt and Road Initiative by the response of China when the pandemic hit. I think I'll leave it there. There's already a lot to discuss, I think, but I don't want to go over my 5 minutes, so I leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rudolph. Now a question for Roy Jelinek. Can you explain how Israel has managed its vaccination campaign and how this helped the recovery of the country? Please.
Thank you very much. I will start with thank you for all the organizers and the moderators, so thank you. Regarding Israel, yesterday they lifted the last restriction to wear masks in closed spaces. So for now, there is nothing, I mean, only people that come back from abroad need to go, if they have not vaccinated, they need to go for quarantine. Other than that, we can more or less say we finished with this. And it's very impressive, I have to admit, that they managed to do it. It started, I guess, because it's hard to understand, or it's hard to know why Pfizer choose to do all their tests in Israel. I would suggest the two following reasons. First, personal relationship with, or in the Chinese way to say people-to-people diplomacy, as my friend said before. And the other explanation is that they believe in the Israeli health system. And maybe I can also offer that because Israel is a relatively small country, that all its borders are closed. So it's very easy, more or less easy, if we can claim something like this is easy, but it's easy to test the result of the vaccine in this capacity. So I believe this is 2 or 3 reasons why they choose Israel. And I think that the government, I mean, now we have, since last Sunday, we have a new government, but the government before deserved quite a good respect for this treatment in this pandemic. And I wish everyone here to enjoy the same situation very soon.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jelinek. Olivier Beuilly, can you tell us what are the vaccine needs of the European region?
European region in the EU, you mean?
Okay, yes.
In the EU? Okay. Well, at this stage, the EU is very well advanced in terms of vaccination. We count that EU adult population is around 380 million citizens. And so far, this is a figure of today, we have fully vaccinated already 111 million citizens, so almost a third of EU citizens. And when we count the first doses, we are already beyond 200 million. So with this, at this rhythm, we expect to reach 70% of vaccination, 1 and 2 doses, between mid-July and the end of July. the situation amongst member states is almost identical. Member states have received from the vaccine manufacturers an amount of vaccines that correspond to their population. And some countries are a bit lagging behind. This is the case for Bulgaria, for example, which is still between 20 and 25%. It seems to be related to vaccine hesitancy in this country, to low rate of cases and casualties, but also because Bulgaria, like a few countries of Central Europe, have bought more AstraZeneca vaccines than Pfizer or other available vaccine, and therefore they are lagging behind due to shortages in terms of deliveries of their vaccine. Basically, Bulgaria faced the situation that countries like Italy or France or Germany or Belgium faced in March or April when there was not enough vaccine. But more or less, we are very well advanced, which means that it gives confidence to our member states to open their border to each other, organize the free movement of Europeans within the Schengen area. And it also allows a political shift in the mindset of our leaders at the European Council to start to think that they have enough doses to vaccinate EU population and to start thinking about donation to third countries. And in the External Action Service, this is why we are pushing for the EU to have a more active role in the vaccination of the southern neighborhood and the countries from Algeria to Turkey, which are very different, have different needs, but politically, now our leaders can focus on the external world outside the EU. I think we don't hear you. Or this I don't.
Can't hear you. Flavia?
Flavia, the mic.
The microphone off. Thank you, Mr. Beghi. Back to Moritz Rudolph. Can you tell us what are the three characteristics of China's health diplomacy, please?
Thank you very much. So for China, China's health diplomacy has already been ongoing for quite some time. So as I mentioned before, like since late February, China started its to push forward its narrative of the pandemic and to engage in its health diplomacy. And the three main points would be first, a streamlined propaganda. China is quite efficient in promoting, like having one narrative. You have a white paper that was issued by the State Council in June, and there the story how China sees its role in fighting the pandemic is already outlined, and China is just like pushing forward this narrative in a streamlined way. So you see this, for instance, that in pretty much every single country that has been a recipient of Chinese donations, masks, or but also vaccines, the ambassadors they've written op-eds in the recipient countries and telling the story of how the two countries were able to work together and to solve this issue. And this is an approach that China has been doing before when it was promoting the Belt and Road Initiative in its initial stages, but now it's pretty much every single embassy. In addition to that, what is also a new quality is that China is engaging in Western social media platforms, Twitter, for instance, and all of those embassies are just like posting daily pictures. Every single mask that has been delivered in those countries to just like have a photo op, and it's been quite. Like there must be several people just being involved in putting those positive images from the Chinese side out there. In addition to that, there is efforts to write negatively about other Western vaccines and about the Western approach to fight the pandemic. So right now with G7, it's just like, well, it's too late, and it's been and just like the narrative of those Western countries just like focusing on their own needs before, but China was already there and trying to be a friend of those developing countries. So this is being pushed forward and significantly. The second aspect is strategic deliveries. So I have analyzed all the masks and the donations that were coming from different actors in China over the past year. And what was quite interesting was to see that not always, but sometimes and quite often they reflect strategic interests of China. Well, they're different actors. So they have central governments or local governments. So, for instance, local government of Xinjiang was specifically donating medical equipment to major Muslim countries like Egypt, like Jordan, like Lebanon, like Iraq, like Iran, to also to have this good relationship that China wants to build up with those countries in particular. State-owned enterprises were donating to countries in where they also have strategic interests, of course. So, like for instance, in pick any African country where there's a Chinese state-owned enterprise. This state-owned enterprise will be delivering masks to the local populations, and also in order to generate support there. And we also see this to a lesser extent, but we also see this when it comes to the vaccine donations. Because there, of course, the situation is a little bit more tricky for China because there's this there are other actors on the market and competitors for China. But we see that those countries that were specifically targeted and that were receiving Chinese vaccines, they have become like early champions, early regional champions. And we see this, for instance, in Hungary. We see this in Turkey. We see this in Cambodia and Southeast Asia, the countries that are of strategic importance for China. And what we also see there, but it's also quite interesting, is it's a different dimension, but it's like countries that have not engaged with diplomatic relations with China, who remain diplomatic relations with Taiwan. They are surrounded by countries that are getting a significant help from China. For instance, Paraguay is surrounded by countries which just like have a higher vaccination rates, often coming from China. El Salvador, which just recently switched diplomatic relations, borders Guatemala, and Guatemala has like 4% vaccination rates, but El Salvador is marching ahead with almost 30% at this point. And those were the countries that were that received vaccines quite early on. And the third part is it's also a little bit close to the propaganda part, but it's like China has been linking its health diplomacy with the promise for economic or post-COVID recovery. And so this is also something what China has been promoting already since May 2020, when it held various forums with African states, with states from the Middle East, through its China Plus Arab League Cooperation Forum. And there it is, it's just on the agenda, the post-COVID situation, and China is already promising investments in those regions because the geopolitical opportunity for China that has been arising there has been also openly communicated within China since quite early of the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you again, Moritz. Roger Jelinek, how do the locals, both states and civil actors, react to these Chinese and Russian actions? And then what should we expect to see in the near future in the health and vaccine relationship between the Middle East and North Africa region, Russia and China?
I will do my best to answer this very long question in less than 5 minutes. But let's start with what Moritz said, that in the beginning, before every country understand the situation, and China started very quickly to send masks and the other equipment, the people, we can see kind of division between the people that see China as the source of the pandemic, which is probably a fact, but it's still on a debate between the US and China. We'll go back to this in a second. And the other part that see China as the source of the solution, because they send masks, and as Moritz said, they send, and every mask they send, you can find so many articles in the Chinese newspaper, in the local newspaper. I can say it mostly about the Arab countries in the region, about Israel, and they publish like very, very widely every step they do. This is part of the Chinese mechanism, of Chinese soft power mechanism. At some point, we saw the local attitude turn a little bit more against China. We saw it more in the European side of the Mediterranean, like in Spain or Italy, that the average of people that see in the last Pew Center survey that see China as an unfavorable country, because it's the source of the pandemic, and many of the a big part of the Chinese motivation to handle this or to distribute the vaccine all over the world is because they want to control the discourse about this coronavirus. If the U.S. President Donald Trump tried to do a lot of effort to use the Chinese virus, they tried very widely in their capacity, which is very, very big, as we all know. They try to change the discourse. And so at this point, the Chinese we can even see that they use the pandemic to make them look better than the US. This is part of the struggle I just mentioned in the beginning of my 5 minutes. I have 1.5. So we just saw that Joe Biden, the American president, declared that the US will distribute all over the third world 500 million doses. And this is, it's a wonderful step, but we need to see it in the big picture is the US-China competition. And it's not a random number. This is exactly the number that the Chinese used before. So it is competition between the two superpowers over that the previous president, Donald Trump, just neglected in the beginning, and Joe Biden tried to do something very different. For Russia, they have smaller capacity than China, so they focus more in their the areas they see as related to them, which mean Central Asia and part of Europe, and they distribute their vaccine there. And some countries in the Middle East, which is Syria, and the Palestinian authorities received from them. I think I finished my 5 minutes, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Roy. A double question, double answer, of course. Back to Mr. Bailly. How do Russian and Chinese vaccine diplomacies impact the Mediterranean region?
Very interesting question. It's true, as the admiral say, that China and Russia are the main players around the world for vaccine diplomacy. We could add India before the export ban. Basically, these vaccine diplomacies try to target some countries that have little access to vaccine due to limited financial resources, or because they want to build an alliance with them and have some strategic access to their own resources or ports or whatever assets that they may have. In the southern neighborhood of the Mediterranean Sea, we have basically two categories. We have three countries that have been targeted with two main elements. When it comes to vaccine, it's basically Turkey and Egypt for the Russian Sputnik, and it's Turkey, Morocco, and Egypt for the Chinese vaccines. Turkey and Egypt being targeted by both Russia and China. So I don't know who is smarter, Russia and China, or Egypt and Morocco to have accepted both offers, but basically these countries have received or have contracted vaccines with these two powers. The main differences between Russia and China is that China delivers the doses. In our calculation, Russia has so far delivered less than 5% of the volume of doses procured by Russia in total in the world. And that's the same situation for this country. Russia procured a lot. They are the top industry in terms of procurement of vaccine around the world, but they are those who deliver less. So they procure big, they communicate big, but they deliver little. And it's a huge disappointment for the authorities and the public opinion of this country. While China has delivered already more than 40% of all the contracts procured, and they appear as a reliable trade partner. What is less reliable, of course, is sometimes the financial condition of these contracts, because these vaccines are less expensive than Western vaccines, but the loans that are offered attached to these contracts can have some provisions that bound the countries to the Chinese authorities for quite some time in conditions that are not necessarily favorable to the clients. There is a second aspect of this vaccine diplomacy. It's the production capacity. Russia, first, has quickly understood that it didn't have the industrial mean and capacity to develop the production of Sputnik to honor all these contracts. Therefore, they have outsourced in 16 countries around the world their production, and in this region, in particular with Egypt, Turkey, and Algeria. And China, 3 months later, has done it with 9 countries around the world and one country, of this region, which is Egypt. So Egypt accumulates factories of both Sinopharm and Sputnik, and receive vaccine for both countries, which explain that for the countries that have been able to secure doses of production with one or two of these two powers, you have a level of access to vaccine which is quite high, and if the condition in the domestic conditions allow, also vaccination rates that are close to 20%, or above in the case of Turkey, and of course high above in the case of Morocco. This is an issue for the EU diplomatic system, because we see that they are pick and choosing in this region according to their strategic objectives. They fragmented the region, and they amplify the disparities amongst the regions. So it's time for the EU to intervene and try to rebalance these disparities and to be an actor in all these countries, but in particular in those who have not been targeted so far by Russia and China.
Thank you, Mr. Bailly. Moritz Rudolph, I come back to you to ask what role does the Middle East and the North Africa region play for the Belt and Road Initiative in general and within China's health diplomacy in particular?
Thank you very much. So when we look at the whole Mediterranean region, then for the Chinese side, you always have a multi-level approach. You always have a bilateral component where there's this also within the Belt and Road framework. It's also specifically, you have a document that says what is the Chinese interest in this specific country. So you have this bilateral component there. In addition to that, as I mentioned before, you have those China plus X mechanisms. So in this region of countries bordering the Mediterranean, you would have, of course, the 17+1 mechanism with countries in the Balkan region, for instance, also being specifically targeted within the Belt and Road framework. Then you have the China plus Arab League Cooperation Forum, which also has this, as I mentioned before, has been dealing with health cooperation for a long time, and they have also been. You have this China, the first China Arab states white paper, which specifically outlines China's interest there has been published, I think, in January 2017, if I'm not wrong. So also for quite some time. And then you have the other format, which is China plus like the Forum of China and African Cooperation Forum. So this also covers countries which border the Mediterranean. So when we now, so those are the mechanisms, and then so China's interests in the Belt and Road Initiative of those countries that border the Mediterranean there, the most important one, as was already mentioned, is Egypt. So within the Belt and Road Initiative, Egypt has been a pivotal country, which has been like for a couple of years now saying that it wants to be the hub to enter or to open the door for China in its plans to establish a digital Silk Road. So this is a development that we have there. And then also, as was mentioned there, the production capacity, the cooperation agreement with Vaxera that was which now will be an open door for Egypt to producing vaccines for Africa, but also for other countries which are, of course, also bordering the Mediterranean there. So Egypt is of crucial importance here. The other countries that were mentioned before, I think for Turkey is a little bit tricky because in Turkey you have the Uyghurs. In Turkey you have this contract over 100 million doses, and you have 50% delivered. And then the other 50%, there's like this debate, well, whether the Chinese side uses this as a bargaining chip for the extradition treaty between Turkey and China to be ratified before releasing the rest of those vaccines. So this is already within Turkey a domestic debate that is ongoing. And then what was mentioned also, like Morocco. Yes, Morocco is the champion in the region, and so they were just they were able to sign an agreement quite early on. And so the other countries which we have been receiving, like on this diplomatic part, have received donations are Syria, Tunisia, Lebanon. There has been now the promise for a significant financial contribution plus a couple of hundreds of thousands of 200,000 vaccines for Gaza and for the Palestinian region. So I think this is also like the region that's been targeted there. Others are Montenegro and Bosnia-Herzegovina. So those countries are receiving and Albania. Sorry, Albania has sent a deal over 1 million doses as well. So, what are, when we compare it to the Belt and Road Initiative, what are the most important countries in the region which also stand out in China's health diplomacy? It's clearly Egypt, which is the most important one, and then other countries. Just from a strategic perspective, how China is promoting it, they come in second. Several of those are also important. We can talk about each one of them, but Egypt, I would say, is the most important one.
Thank you, Maurice. Thank you. Again, Roy Jelinek, I would like to ask you, what are the roles of the European Union and the United States in this game?
I think, as we already discussed, that China and Russia and India to some extent, and these three countries, Russia, China, and India, started their vaccine diplomacy much earlier than EU and US, because the EU and US started with their own people, and these countries started with using their vaccine for diplomacy purposes. But as we just said, Joe Biden, since Joe Biden elected, the vaccine campaign in the US became much faster. The same about the EU, as Oliver said, that it's going pretty well now. And now people will in EU and US will start to be more active in other countries to donate vaccines and other equipment if needed. And I think it's very essential, because the reason we just said that this is part of the competition between the West and if to take all the countries together, the West and China, and it's very heated competition that take part in every aspect of life, from diplomacy, digital, and every other aspect. And I think that we just saw the G7 summit that the leaders spoke about it, and they understand it. I think understand this situation very well now, that this is part of the game, that they need to take care of the others, and not only speak about it, like really do it. Well, China already in the game for a few good months, and it will be hard. And in addition to this, and I just went back last week from UAE, and I asked them why you choose the Chinese vaccine. I met a few people from the government and a few people from universities there, why you can like afford yourself to buy Pfizer, not only the vaccine. So what they said, yeah, because we wanted to produce it here, and Pfizer will never let us do it here. The Chinese did it in a second. So this is the international the IP is very essential part, and Joe Biden also referred to this in one of his speeches recently. And but this brings us to the big question, like this fight between if we need to protect this IP or not is not just a small question or a business question. Is much more about values and which values we want the world to act upon, if we want this one or this one. That's all from my side.
Thank you, Roy. In the end, Olivier Bailly, what can the European Union do, and what can you tell us of the COVAX initiative?
We have two ways to help third countries through donations. The first one is direct donations to member states who own the doses can decide, with the agreement of the vaccine manufacturers and the contract, which is quite complex to design, they can decide to donate part of their national stock to a third country. Usually they give to a close neighbor, a friend, a former colony. So the first country to do that was Romania with Moldova, 4 times already. And we saw it already with other Eastern countries of Europe, with countries close to the Eastern Partnership. But it's quite limited so far, around 1.5 million doses shared that way. It is legally complex, and operationally, we use the European Civil Protection Mechanism that is paid by the EU budget at the level of 75% of the cost of the transport. It was the first solution for the member state, because with this solution they can target and choose exactly the country they want and put their flag with the European flag on this shipment. But we finance heavily COVAX that we helped created last year. We have now pledged more than 3.2 billion euro. And 2 weeks ago, the European Council, the meeting of the EU leaders, decided to donate to COVAX at least 100 million doses. Some member states, like France, like Spain, like Portugal, have indicated that their donation should be also targeted to some countries. France for Africa, Latin America for Spain, and a Lusophone country from Portugal. While others said, we give to COVAX, and COVAX will do its job, which is basically to give equitable access to countries that are members of COVAX. This situation has changed a bit with COVAX, because COVAX lacked doses because of the Indian export ban of vaccine. And second, they lack money. So, and now that the US are back in the game, now that the US want also to donate to COVAX, the term and the conditions of the donation to COVAX are a bit changing. And now COVAX is much more open to earmark accept the earmarking of the donation of some member states. For example, the US published a list 2 weeks ago of 19 million doses covering 50 countries around the world that will receive these doses through COVAX. So COVAX seems to become or evolve into an instrument of distribution, which is quite important for our member states. And I think out of the 100 million doses so far, this figure will increase soon. I would say 90% of the doses of the EU will be shared through COVAX with a specific earmarking. And the second evolution that COVAX is now accepting is that we will be able to put the EU flag on the shipment. So with these two evolutions, earmarking and visibility, I think our member states are now more confident to share their doses through COVAX, who has the means, the legal and the technical means to do it. We finance it in a way also. And I hope that we will be able to target some of the countries of the southern border of the Mediterranean Sea. The situation of these countries related when it comes to COVAX is quite diverse. Turkey and Israel are not members of COVAX, and some are self-financing, like Libya and Jordan, while the other expect to receive free doses from COVAX. But again, as COVAX is for the time being facing shortages of doses, they basically receive nothing. And the three countries that are at most risk of not being able to cope with the pandemics if there was a new wave are Algeria, Tunisia, and Syria. And these are the ones we would like to help first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beghi. This closes our event, and I wish to thank you all for the very interesting insights and reflections you were willing to share with us today. The stability of the Mediterranean in all its aspects is a crucial strategic factor for the welfare of the region and for the world well-being. The political dimension of health and vaccine diplomacy plays and will increasingly play a key role, and it will be important for Europe and the United States to participate as protagonists in this new important game. Thanks again to our guests and speakers. Thank you, Admiral Agostini, for organizing this event, and we wish you and the personnel of Operation Irini good work. Thank you again to Moritz Rudolph, Roy Jelinek, and Olivier Beghi for sharing their insight with us today. Good evening, everybody. See you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Grazie. Grazie.
Thank you very much for having us.
Bye.